Fox News host Judge Jeanine Pirro recently went on a rant about the situation in Iraq. ISIS, President Obama, ball shaming, it literally had everything. Now, I've got some highlights of that rant, and then I'm going to break down why this woman is absolutely insane and therefore perfect for Fox News primetime. Roll it.
I've told you that you need to be afraid because they are coming for you. The ISIS assault, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, signals the beginning of the reverse crusade. They are coming for us. To them, we are the infidels. But I, for one, am not willing to let one more American die or come home with fewer limbs from that part of the world. Americans have shed enough blood there. My resolution? Airstrikes. Bomb them. Bomb them. Keep bombing them. Bomb them again and again.
Because bombing makes everything better. But wait, she's not done scaring the shit out of you yet.
They told us they were coming for us. The head of this band of savages, Abu al-Baghdadi, was released by the Obama administration and started ISIS 1 year later in 2010.
Fact check. She's full of shit. According to the Department of Defense, al-Baghdadi was released in 2004. Not only that, but the Bush administration was working on ending the policy of Americans holding large numbers of Iraqis in detention camps. And it was in the process of turning them over to the Iraqi government, so if Baghdadi had still been held by that time, his release would have already been most likely guaranteed by the Iraqi government and not ours. So if he were released, it would be because of the recently mentioned Status of Forces agreement that was signed in 2008 at the end of the Bush presidency that promised to turn over nearly all Iraqi prisoners to the Iraqi government that would decide what to do with them. Please, Jeanine, continue.
ISIS is a fanatical religious terrorist organization, and if you think they are nothing more than ragtag rebels, you are wrong. The truth? There has been a 60% increase in radical Islamist terrorism since you've been in office. And you just keep letting these guys out. Like the Bergdahl trade and the 5 terrorists, you didn't have the balls to try and Gitmo or federal court. You are simply clueless, a paper tiger who only knows how to cut and run.
A 60% increase in Islamic terrorism? Holy shit, how come I haven't heard about all that terrorism? 60%? Holy shit. Oh, you know why I haven't heard about it? Yeah, because she's wrong. The study by Rand that she indirectly references showed an increase in terrorist groups, not incidences of terrorism. Now look, that's still bad, okay? So the question is, where are these groups and where are these groups forming? Well, they're forming in places where there are weak governments, right? Governments that have faced revolution, sometimes aided by, oh, would you look at that? Aided perhaps by us.
It's your feckless, weak foreign policy on the world stage that is creating a danger zone for all Americans. You and Hillary armed and trained terrorists and gave them true battlefield experience. And then you did a cut and run in Libya and Iraq, leaving our weapons behind. The irony, Mr. President, it will be with our taxpayer-funded weapons that they will be coming for us.
The weapons, by the way, are what we gave to the Iraqi government after the Status of Forces agreement in 2008. Remember, we just mentioned it, Obama wanted to stay longer, but because Iraq wouldn't allow our troops to stay under our terms, we pulled out. I wouldn't quite call that a cut and run.
So now that your numbers are in the tank, 54% say you're not able to lead, you have a 41% job approval rating, 37% foreign policy approval. You now pick up the ringleader of that Benghazi massacre. Our special forces now arrest Katala. Wow. Mr. President, Americans don't trust you for good reason. We're not convinced you even know who the enemy is. You release terrorists, you cut deals with Iran, you dance around with your political correctness while they sharpen their knives. Mr. President, you are playing a very dangerous game for which you are ill-prepared, and it is the American people who will suffer.
No Fox broadcast is complete without mentioning Benghazi and, of course, having a large amount of classic fear-mongering. Now, let's not forget who else released terrorists. If we're talking about presidents that dealt with terrorists and cut deals with Iran, I think it's important to mention Ronald Reagan. Now, I gotta say, hats off to Judge Jeanine for carrying on the fine tradition of lying, fear-mongering, spreading political bullshit. I'd keep an eye on this host, America. This lady, she's going places.
This woman is, it's hard for me to say 100% wrong, because a lot of times throughout our history, which I'm guessing, according to her, started the day Obama took office, we've armed people who would later become our enemies, like arming the Mujahideen, who would later spawn such characters as Osama bin Laden. We armed Saddam Hussein to go after the Iranians in the 80s, and then Desert Storm 1 was when we first regretted that because they were using our weapons against us. Like, this is like the history of interventionism in our country, is we arm people who aren't really our friends, but at the moment we have another enemy that we want them to go after, and then they later turn those weapons on us. So, like, pointing out that the ISIS people have our weapons is a good thing to point out. But pointing out that they have our weapons because of Obama and not because of the Iraq War, which was started under George W. Bush, doesn't make any sense. Like, we spent all this money training basically deserters who didn't really care about Iraq. We armed them over the years for more than since 2008. We've been giving the Iraq.
We spent $2 trillion in Iraq, and a lot of that money went to arming the Iraqi army. And look, the Iraqi army, they're deserters because they don't care about Iraq. Iraq doesn't exist to them. That's not a thing. That's a thing that Britain came up with and that the West agreed with. Like, right. We made Iraq. Iraq's not a real thing. And that's why you said earlier, and it made a whole lot of sense when you said it, that Iraq is going to be partitioned into 3 parts, and maybe it's better that way. Because I don't see any sort of problem, or I don't see any sort of solution to this problem other than keeping them separate and letting them do their own thing. You can't hold that country together, and I wouldn't even try.
And there is, it's not to say that there isn't problems with that. Like, the Kurds want a Kurdistan. Our ally Turkey has a lot of Kurds on that border. So, like, they're going to want those Kurds in their country. But luckily, for the most part, throughout Turkey's history, they've been more generous to minorities than the Iraqi government or the Iranian government or the Syrian government. So, like, maybe that won't happen. But the Kurds are going to merge with parts of Syria. The Sunnis are going to merge with parts of Syria. Like, that's going to happen. I didn't know this until recently. But the Iranian government always thought of Syria as their own Shiite province. So, like, the idea of these countries being like what we say they are just because they're on a globe with those imaginary lines drawn around them is just fiction. Like, these people are going to break up. Like, it would have taken an amazing leader, right? And like, I hate to say that because Saddam Hussein kind of kept Iraq together, but it would have taken an amazing.
It would take either an amazing leader to try and help people get over their sectarian lines, or it takes a brutal dictator to crush you to keep you together. And that's what Saddam Hussein was. He was the brutal dictator that kept everything together because he ruled with an iron fist.
And by the way, this is a lot of this is not only the Bush administration's fault, but it's Maliki's fault. Like, we remember, like, years and years ago, obviously Fox News and most of the mainstream media doesn't remember the stories about Maliki clearing out the opposition party, which was the Sunni party. That, like, I think he called the first person, which would be the equivalent of John Boehner, like the leader of the Republicans in the House, like he called them terrorists and like was targeting those people. So this is the Sunni backlash. Like this is partly that it's partly that we invaded, partly that we installed a corrupt government, partly that the corrupt government is corrupt, but mostly the fact that these people hate each other. Like, and it's a deep-seated hate that goes back 1,000 years, and we're not going to fix it no matter how many billions or trillions we spend, no matter how many Americans go and die. The only thing that's going to change is that Americans are going to die, along with Sunnis, Shiites, and Kurds.
And we also can't fix it by following Judge Jeanine's advice and just bombing the shit out of everything. That doesn't work. The only thing that you're going to do, and Russell Brand pointed this out when he did his own rebuttal of this video, and he went and dissected it just the way that we did. He said that, look, every bomb you drop, it's not actually really a bomb. If you look at it metaphorically, I guess, it's a seed. And every time that seed hits the ground, it pops out terrorists. That's essentially what, he put it much more eloquently than I did, of course, but it's essentially every bomb that you drop, you're creating more terror. And that's the whole problem, too, that we have against drone strikes, is that drone strikes in those areas, that also serves to create more terrorists. So if you want to guarantee that ISIS or that any of these Islamic groups over in Iraq are going to attack us, then follow Judge Jeanine, follow Dick Cheney, follow Paul Wolfowitz, follow all of their shitty advice, and bomb an airstrike or put boots on the ground, because you're going to have a guaranteed surge in anti-American sentiment, even more than it is now.
And the amazing thing is that they are not going to attack us in the near future at all. Like this group, these people in these countries, they are fighting a civil war. Even if we support the policy of a peaceful division into 3 separate nations, like that peaceful alternative is going to be a bloody massacre. Like they're not going to be like, you know what we should do? We should go nuke America with planes and nukes that we don't have. Like, it's ridiculous. I remember people were talking about how ISIS had an air force. ISIS had an air force because they took over bases that have the helicopters that we bought the Iraqi army. But there's like this big joke that a lot of people don't realize is that those helicopters in Iraq and Afghanistan that we're giving away, they don't know how to fly them. They don't know how to fix them. Like, we are like, I'm being serious. Like, the only people in Iraq that probably know how to fly those helicopters are the Shiites who were trained in Iran, or the Sunnis that used to work for Saddam Hussein, who actually aren't radical Muslims. They're, I would say, moderates. They're dictators. Like, they support a dictatorship. They supported Saddam Hussein, but they're not like a religious dictatorship. So, like, the idea that they're going to fly these Russian helicopters out of Iraq into New Jersey or Michigan or California, like, it's ridiculous. This is a regional problem that could escalate in that region and be a disaster for that region, but it's not like it's not really a terrorist situation. It's a civil war situation with a tactic of terrorism involved.